Previously, we talked about how populations grow in nature and that at some point they're going to stop growing and the population size will stay the same. And today we're going to explore why that happens. What determines the carrying capacity? In 2 words, the answer is limiting factors, which controls the growth of a population by determining the carrying capacity of an environment. And the most fundamental limiting factor are nutrient limits. The growth of plants is typically limited by 1 or more nutrients that must be taken up by the plants through their roots. And that's why farmers use fertilizer to add nutrients to the ground. And all nutrient cycles work together like gears in a machine. If any nutrient in the system is in short supply, the whole system starts to slow down. Now, some limiting factors are density dependent, meaning that they affect the most when the number of organisms in an area is high. And the first most obvious type of limiting factor is predation and the herbivore effect, which is that populations are going to cycle up and down over time based on if they are eaten by predators. Here's a classic example of how predators and prey will be each other's limiting factors. There's an island called Isle Royale, which has a predator population of wolves and a prey population of moose. And we can see this chart here that has the populations going up and down. The white dots are going to be wolves and the black dots are going to be moose. As the moose population grows large enough to be easy prey for the wolves have plenty to eat. And so their population grows, but the death rate of the moose rises, and so the moose population will go down. As the moose population goes down, the wolves begin to starve since they don't have enough moose to eat, which leads to a death rate in the wolf population, and so the wolf population goes down. And with few predators that are left, the moose population death rate goes down, and so the moose population will go back up. And so we can see this cycle repeating. And this same idea is going to happen between plants and herbivores, as we mentioned an example between a white-tailed deer and its favorite type of grass. Another limiting factor is parasites and disease-causing organisms. For example, things like ticks, which will feed at the expense of their host, weakening the host and causing disease or death. And so this depends on how many hosts there are, since the denser the host population, the more easily parasites can spread from one host to another. Another limiting factor is competition. When populations become crowded, individuals within that population, or different populations, will compete for things like food, water, space, sunlight, and other essentials. Some are going to have enough to survive and reproduce, but others are just going to have enough to live but not raise offsprings, and still others may starve or die, lowering their birth rates. And so this is going to be a major limiting factor, and it's going to depend on how many animals there are, since the more individuals living in an area, the sooner they use up the available resources. And besides just competition, overcrowding by itself can be a limiting factor, since it will cause species to fight amongst themselves, raising the stress levels and weakening the body's ability to resist disease. Also, it can cause the neglect of the offsprings of the babies, raising the death rate. And if there's a lot of overcrowding, animals might emigrate, which also lowers the population. Now, these factors we mentioned were density dependent, meaning they relied on how many organisms there are. But there are some density independent limiting factors that are going to affect all populations in similar ways, regardless of the population size or density. These things include unusual weather, such as droughts or floods, and natural disasters, such as wildfires. Yesterday, we mentioned this plant, which is a seaweed called a hydrilla, and how when it was introduced into a new environment in Florida, the population began to grow exponentially. And that is because in its natural environment, there are limiting factors like competition and being eaten by consumers, which are going to limit their growth. But when they're introduced into a new environment, those limiting factors are not found, and the result is going to be exponential growth like we mentioned. Now, there have been efforts at artificial control, such as herbicides, which cause these populations to die out, or actual manual removal, but this only offers a temporary solution and are very often expensive. And so at this moment, the best means for control seem to be importing consumers in order to control the population. And so that's all you need to know for today. Tomorrow, we're going to take a look at human population growth and how that affects the environment. And next week, we're going to finish up our study of ecology. And so stay tuned for the test and updates on the Google Classroom. If you have any questions about today's lesson, please send it to me in the Google Classroom. Make sure to answer the questions below correctly. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.